Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Accelerate to Industry Talk. Happy Friday. I know it has been a long week for so many of us, and I know all of you students had midterms this week, so I really applaud you for making the time to get a little professional development in what is a very busy time for you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jill Huerta. I'm Executive Director of the Center for Graduate Life. And I'm about to introduce our wonderful speakers today. But before that, let me say a few words on logistics for this event for those of you who haven't joined us before. This is a really cool platform called Hopin that was a product of the pandemic, like so many other tech innovations. And the part that we're in right now is called the stage. And this is where our presenters will be sharing their presentation with you. And during that time, you'll be able to chat in questions or comments only using the chat box that's available to you. When they're finished with their presentation, I'll hop back on and I'll explain to you how to move to a session room. And that's where we'll have the Q&A. And the session room will allow 10 people at a time to unmute their cameras and mics and interact with faces and voices in a much more meaningful way. So plan on unmuting yourself if there's a spot left, introducing yourselves to our guests and asking your questions. And then when you're finished, you may want to go back to muting yourself to give room for someone else. So let me welcome all of you from Equitable. Equitable is a financial services company, and as a historian by training, a business historian, I was so pleased to see that you've been around since 1859, which is such a long tradition. It's really amazing. So Equitable does financial planning, they do retirement, they do life insurance and employee benefits. And I'll let you all talk about that a little more. Joining us today, we have Susan Clifford, who is lead director and senior human resources business partner. We have Mark Berkowsky, who is senior director of recruiting and onboarding. And we have Michelle Schultz, lead director of the Innovation and Design Office. Susan, Mark, Michelle, thanks so much for joining us today. And without further delay, I'm going to let you bring up your presentation and get started.
Okay, thank you, Jill. We are so thrilled to be here, so excited to share our work with this team and hope that you get a lot out of this as you continue through this. We wanted to thank Jill and Ivana and the rest of the entire UNCC Center for Grad Learning. And as part of the A2I program, again, we couldn't be more pleased than sharing this with you today. So I hope my technology will work well, and I'm going to try to transition now over to the slides that we've prepared. So bear with me for just one moment, and hopefully I can get that taken care of. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Very good, thank you. As Jill mentioned, Equitable has been around for over 160 years. We evolved into the name Equitable just last year. We were the AXA Equitable Group, and so in 2019, we did move into the fully named Equitable. Athena is our brand logo, and Athena symbolizes our mission of helping our clients to achieve financial well-being with courage, strength, and wisdom with their financial planning and advice, life insurance, retirement, and employee benefits. We have a $10.3 billion market cap and $746 billion in assets under management. We're a diversified business with leading positions in some of these select markets. Our resilient business model allows us to manage through headwinds. In individual retirement, about 60% of our business model, we are number 2 in the variable annuity space. In group retirement, we're about 15% involved in our teacher and public sector tax-deferred retirement and retirement securities. We're number one in the industry from the K through 12 educators market space. Protection solutions, it equates to about 11% of our product mix, and that's in life insurance and small business employee benefits, which is a growth engine for our company. And then we do have a longstanding partnership with AllianceBernstein with approximately 15% of investment management research and advice to high net worth clients. So that's a little bit about who we are.
Susan, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can you make the presentation larger? It looks a little small.
Okay, let me see how I can do that.
I think if you presentation mode would.
Yeah, let me just do presentation mode. There we go. Does that fill the screen now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for letting me know. All right, so what we were hoping to cover with you today is not only a little bit about our company, but we know you've had a series of speakers through the A2I program, and we really want to provide you not only with some thought around your strategic career journey, but a little bit about learning through a lifetime and a career, and all the ways that we are continuing to leverage intent-based leadership, mindset shifts, and continuous learning. So we're going to introduce adaptive leadership to you and share with you why it's important. We really want to create some awareness of the mindset shifts, how they impact our corporate culture. When we look at the products and the services, we truly don't make products. We are in the relationship business. So our intent-based leadership needs to focus first on our clients. When we look at our clients, we realize that our U.S. population is rapidly aging. We have retirees are expected to grow by 40% by the year 2035. And that means that the rapidly aging environment, there are over 10,000 people turning 65 every day. That pace is going to continue to increase further. We expect 11,000 per day by 2022 and 12,000 per day by 2050. So that really causes us to take a look at our offerings and shift our business. So we wanted to share a little bit about those early observations and the impact to our business. And as we go through this learning journey as a company, we wanted to entice you to learn more about that through how you will approach your own career journey. And the ways you should maybe be thinking about that and leveraging some of these learnings as you go about your career. And so we'll also provide you with an introduction to that. What does it look like? What are the new ways of working at Equitable? And then we'll help to align our learning journey, hopefully with your strategic career journey. So with that, we wanted to just give you a little bit of insight about my own career journey, and then I'll turn it over to Michelle and to Mark to just share a little bit about, their career journey and how lifelong learning has really played a role in our own career growth. So I have been in the industry, financial services primarily, for more than 25 years. I stopped counting a few years ago. But I did start at an early stage in my career in financial services with some regional banking areas in trust and investments. And then I moved from that into some other areas of the bank and really kind of learned different ways of doing business through mergers and acquisitions. So I spent a lot of time learning and growing. And as we acquired new business, having to go into some change management capabilities and really understand how the culmination of mergers and acquisitions impacted businesses every day and throughout, the change and evolvement into a new business model. So not only did I do that from the business side, but I also got involved in investments, and I wound up getting a series of licenses that would help me to apply that to my career journey and work in a capacity that I could advise clients and manage assets myself. So that perspective was really helpful. And I did that as a relationship manager for an investment firm. And then I moved into other areas of my career journey with different companies. So every time I looked at my career journey, I was adding skills and I was adding capabilities and I was applying those skills and really shifting my perspective. So I didn't always take the next step up or a hierarchical approach to how I went about my career journey, but I really did look at ways that I could develop and grow and learn. I don't know if you are familiar with Strengths Finders or not, but I highly encourage Strengths Finders, and learner is one of my top 5 strengths, and it has been throughout my career. So I have a keen interest and passion for this, and I've applied that not only as I worked on the business side, but then started to work through some change management initiatives and eventually found my way onto the HR side. So learning and growing and working in that space of the business really helped me to become more impactful as I decided to change and shift into another facet. Not only did I, work on the business side and then work in the HR space, but then I decided to move out of the financial services industry and broaden my aspects. I went to work in a law firm and a regional law firm that was growing into a national capacity. Then I went to work for a third-party vendor from one of my former work. I went into corporate real estate space, but then I was still supporting the financial services industry. So I looked at it from the outside in and then from the inside out, if you will. So very different ways to approach a career journey, but always building and growing and learning throughout. So, I think it has served me well because each one of those either opportunities as a growth engine or in a different industry helped me to set the stage for that next jump into a different, greater role. It wasn't always a bigger role, but it was always a way to continue to grow and expand and really provide value for my clients and for the company that I went to work for. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to stop there and then ask Michelle to share a little bit about her.
Hey, thanks, Susan. Hello, everyone. So I started my career in the mid 80s. So I have a little bit more years of service than Susan. I'm about 35, 36 years now. I've been working in business in the
Michelle, I stopped counting, but yeah, I think I'm there too.
In the financial services sector. I worked mainly for 2 companies, for Mutual of New York and then AXA. So AXA acquired money in the early 2000s. So I entered the workforce through the finance department, and then decided about 5 years later that I was interested in HR, and entered HR through the learning and development teams, and worked doing training and development for several years, and then transitioned over to our comp and benefits. So I was trying to get well-rounded in HR because I had a lot of interest in that. And then in the early 2000s, after we were acquired by AXA, I was given the opportunity to become an HR business partner. So working within our business lines with senior leaders and their teams, I got to work quite a bit through different groups and learned a lot about the company through that process. Bring to today, the most exciting role I've had yet. And what I've learned from all of those years of transitioning to different roles, working with different groups, is it all kind of leads up and brings you all to the place that you belong at any given moment. I always say, no matter where you turn, it's the right one. And that's because I have a role now with the organization, which Susan and I are going to talk to you about, in the Innovation Design Office, working to roll out our adaptive leadership or to change our culture and our mindsets of the company. And having had a lot of experience with a lot of the leaders of the organization and a lot of the people of the organization, it has helped me in this new role. So we will talk to you more about the role in our upcoming slides. So I'm excited to do that. Thank you for the invitation. Mark.
Thanks, Michelle. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Berkowsky and I head up corporate recruiting for Equitable. My career journey is kind of interesting because a lot of things have happened to me, and I've thought that they were wonderful opportunities, so I let them. But I started off thinking that I would be a clinical psychologist. So went to college and then graduate school, and then was about to start a PhD for clinical psychology. And I realized that I was actually very tired of being poor. So it was time to actually think about going out and finding a job. But when you've been sort of on one path for a long time, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to move into corporate. Clinical psychology doesn't necessarily translate very well. So I was very fortunate. I got hired, started my career working in the search business, working on commission. Did that for a number of years and loved it. Was in the IT recruiting business, which I won't say what decade that was because I'm definitely not going to go there. Though I have had a recent experience where we were looking at bringing a vendor on board and their website had pictures of 4 people. And they said combined, they had 25 years of experience. And I'm like, I have more than that. That's not a very good selling point. So was doing the agency work and then had an opportunity to move into corporate. And I moved to Prudential, where I was able to, on the corporate side, focus on recruiting entry-level financial service professionals. And I loved that opportunity. I was traveling all over the country. I was out in the field all the time working with the sales force, got a great exposure to financial services and the value that financial services provides to their clients. It was amazing to sit in on some of those meetings and listen to our financial professionals talk to clients about their future, protecting their family. It was amazing. And I sort of fell in love with the business. Did that for 8 years with Prudential. And then I was actually living in Connecticut, working in New Jersey, and I decided that that wasn't possible. It was just crazy. So moved to what was then Hewitt Associates, which is now Aon, where I had the opportunity to actually change career directions. I joined as a manager of recruiting, but they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I'd like to try and be an HR business partner. So they gave me the opportunity to be an HR business partner, where I supported the health management practice and the retirement practice. So continued to work with actuaries as I did at Hewitt, at Prudential, but realized as I was doing the HR business partner role, much as I liked working with the hiring managers or with the managers, I realized that my true love was actually recruiting. So with Hewitt, I went back into the recruiting space, became the head of recruiting for North American Consulting. So again, got to travel all over the country, got to travel to spend a lot of time in Canada, and help basically hire the people who drove revenue for a consulting firm. So one of the things that's always been important to me from a career perspective is I need to be able to have that line of sight to what I do. How does that drive the business? And so for me with recruiting, I always know that my team is bringing the people on board to the organization that makes it possible to do what we do. So the line of sight is very clear for me as to how we help our businesses succeed. So from Aon Hewitt, I had a window in my mind. I had a window of about 5 years before I actually had to start paying for 2 children to be in college. And I wanted to go work in the not-for-profit sector. So I was very fortunate that I was able to land a position as head of recruiting for the New York Public Library, which was awesome. It was the second largest library in the country. Now, we were always jealous, quite frankly, of the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library because you guys were amazing. But the opportunity to work for the New York Public Library and support the programs that they have for the community, bring people on board who work in the branch libraries. There were 90 different locations across New York City. Was an amazing opportunity. But yeah, not-for-profit, 2 kids in school, it was time to move on, and I joined what was then AXA Equitable. in 2014, and I was in charge of recruiting. So for me, what I've always been fortunate enough is to have opportunities presented to me that gave me the opportunity to expand my career, to learn new things at the library. I was ultimately the head of talent management, where I led learning. I led the analytics function, the HR business partner, and the recruiting function. And again, just reinforced for me that recruiting is my first love. So, but I also have from way back when I first started, a love of technology. So I really look to see how I can marry those two things at all times. How can we use technology to improve the candidate experience, the hiring manager experience, to make recruiting more efficient and effective? So those two loves, the recruiting piece and the technology piece, sort of have brought me to where I am today. So a little bit about me. Again, thank you for giving us this opportunity. And Susan, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Michelle and Mark. All right. So as we talked about the financial aspects of what we do at Equitable really point to a retirement gap in the future. We know that as the upcoming wave of retirements will take place, that retirement gap is going to continue to grow. We expect by about $3 trillion annually. So when we estimate that the gap in securing income might exceed 137 trillion by 2050, we realize that we have a responsibility and we are uniquely positioned to help people secure their financial well-being so they can pursue long and fulfilling lives. That is our mission. We are also uniquely positioned to help our clients address some of their biggest concerns in life, and that is, having enough money to last a lifetime, remaining financially independent, paying for medical expenses, travel, and enjoy family and friends. So we realize as a company, we have a golden opportunity to fulfill a deep-seated need and grow in the foreseeable future. But to really capture that opportunity, we need to move faster and we need to be more adaptable. So as we talk about that, we are going to introduce the concept of new ways of working. So as I mentioned, we do have a burning platform. We have a very challenging operating environment. We're facing a very difficult macroeconomic environment ahead. Interest rates are very low. They continue to stay low, and that really has an impact on several of our products that are tied to the interest rates. And the stock markets are at all-time highs, but the prospective returns overall could be mediocre. So we also have disruptive threats in both financial and tech company sectors. These are going to continue to increase. So as we look forward, if we really want to continue to grow in a tough marketplace and we don't have a choice, we need to be nimbler and more adaptive to our client needs. So that's really the only way we're going to continue to drive growth and accelerate innovation. So along with that, we really stop and think about how do we do that? We also recognize that there are some shifts in our talent. Over the next 5 years, we know we're going to witness a massive shift in the marketplace. Millennials today are already 38% of the workforce, and by 2025, they should be about half of the workforce. Here at Equitable, they're about 34% of our employees. So to compete effectively, we will need to adapt how we do our work, and that will help better attract and empower the best talent and fulfill and build a robust pipeline of talent for years to come. So the timing for us right now is perfect, and we really have a very strong foundation so that we can attract our millennial talent, given that 63% are interested in working in a purpose-driven organization, which we are. We also know that we want to better serve our clients, and we know that, for instance, Amazon is very focused on the customer. That's their mission, quite literally, to be one of the most customer-centric companies on earth. So to truly help our clients while defending against our disruptive threats, we also need to become obsessed with solving our client needs. So confronting great challenges and capturing great opportunities will require us to fundamentally change how we think, how we work, how we lead. Mark Pearson, our CEO, outlined this week in our Q3 earnings review While we take a moment to recognize our hard work in the third quarter, we must also look forward. We are continuing to transform the company to meet client needs by making thoughtful, deliberate decisions which capitalize on our strengths. In doing so, we are not merely navigating an uncertain environment, but actively shaping our future. So what does that really mean? So we are looking at new ways of working across Equitable. It starts with adaptive leadership. The best decision is a local decision. So we are looking to push authority to information. Now, how does that happen? It means that it's not your traditional hierarchical decision-making capability that we're used to in many organizations. We're really saying that we have to have thinking that happens at all levels. We know that people are healthier and happier that way as they have more control over their work. Everyone becomes a leader. Leaders make it safe. What does that mean? We give psychological safety for others if we are in a leadership position so that they feel free, sharing opinions, providing thoughts that might be different than what your leader may have decided, really bringing a contrarian view and talking through it so that there's a better outcome for all. And so we call that the 3 C's: control, clarity, and competence. And you want to tune that control that the leader in a hierarchical environment may have had. They had control over that decision. You want to tune that based on whoever is closest to the work, that competence of how the work gets done. As long as they provide clarity and message, talk about how to get that done, the better outcome will be there. You see, OKRs, that stands for objectives and key results. So Thomas Edison has said, vision without execution is hallucination. Where do I want to go? How will I know when I get there? Objectives are bold and aspirational. We call them moonshots. We expect to have goals that are going to be set out there as very aggressive and not likely to be achieved in all aspects, but it's okay to fail. And that's where leaders have to make it okay to fail and be agile, to move on, try something. If it doesn't work, toss it aside, but move on. And as you're doing that, you're growing and you're incrementally providing more innovation. And we'll talk further about that and how that works. And then adopting agile. So as you see, we have enterprise agile. This is a very big change management approach that we're taking in our company, but we are quickly giving our customers what they want, not what we think they want. For instance, during the pandemic, we had to very quickly pivot. We were very paper-based, and we were used to going into school systems, for instance, and meeting with all of the leaders within the school district. Can't get into schools. How do we now tap into the relationships that we've already built? And how do we continue to grow in a space where the world changed overnight for all of us? I mentioned paper-based. We used to get applications and have those sent in and have to have a hard copy with wet signatures, if you will. Couldn't happen when you couldn't meet face-to-face with clients. So we had to go very quickly agile and pivot to a more digital environment. Even these meetings, we were used to meeting with clients face-to-face. We were used to meeting with all of our teams in person. Can't do that anymore in these environments. As you all adapt to this, so are we. And we learned very quickly that remote can work, and we can work together through a virtual environment. But above all, we have to really look at moving fast, focusing on our clients, looking at those ways to deliver on those moonshots, make those decisions based on clarity and competence, but above all, deliver value to our clients. So we do that by answering these 5 fundamental questions. And again, that slide I just showed you shows you the OKRs, shows you design thinking, enterprise agile, dynamic funding. And what we're going to focus on today is how do we ensure that the people closest to the work have the authority to making decisions? That really is adaptive leadership. So as our lifelong learning theme underscores, in continuing our corporate learning journey, we recognize that the traditional hierarchical or top-down approach with the highest level leaders making all decisions isn't really going to create that monumental transformation that we as an organization will need to achieve our future state goals. There are many organizations and companies that are realizing this and going through adaptive leadership and new ways of working as well. So we are trying to share that with you. It's part of our learning journey. It's part of our corporate learning journey, and it may at some point be a part of your learning journey and your career path. So the more you have insight into this, the more prepared you'll be to jump into this. This next slide really talks about NWOW, new ways of working. And what you see at the top of this iceberg, if you will, is the new way of working approach, the visibility in doing new ways of working, working in different types of daily routines, working differently as a team, having a daily stand-up, for instance, to talk about what you've been doing that day, what you're planning to do, what you did yesterday, and where those blockers are, and looking at the backlogs. There are all a variety of tools and processes that go into new ways of working. But if you look below the line, the deepest part of this iceberg is really what isn't visible, and it's the being, or the corporate culture, if you will. And this is the hardest part to shift. So you really, not only have to implement new tools and processes, but you have to implement a new set of principles, a new set of values, and really shift that mindset. And it's more about making sure that everyone has a voice, that we put ideas into action faster, that we have what we call our minimum viable products, and we iterate on those, and we continue to iterate, making sure that there is responsibility and active participation at all levels, and that we can make sure that there is a collective impact, and those who take ownership have a voice and really have shared responsibilities in how we get through all levels of the organization and make the processes and tools that much more impactful. So we're going to talk about that even from a business mindset. And I'm going to pass this over to Michelle as she goes into basically the return on investment of why this is so important for companies to adopt. Michelle?
Susan? We're going to move to the next. Yeah, thanks. So as Susan was talking about, what does this mean doing agile versus being agile? So we are moving many of our teams of people into a structure where we help people, as Susan referred to, we help them learn about these things called ceremonies. So they have daily stand-up meetings. They have retrospectives looking back at their last 2 weeks of a sprint, where they're trying to accomplish certain things. So people in the organizations are seeing a lot of things happening as we are standing up these groups of people, which we're referring to as tribes. And that's what we refer to as doing agile. So Kanban boards, daily scrums, sprints, all of these things are structures in which people are trying to accomplish work fast, increasing the metabolism in the company. What we found through studies is that doing agile can bring the company a 20% or more benefit. But interesting enough, as Susan said, the stuff below the surface is what really, really makes this stuff work. Because if we continue in an organization where everything's decided at the top, it's kind of a bottleneck where everyone's got to go to the top and get the decisions made. So what we're looking for is for leaders to create more and more leaders, to multiply them in the organization so that we can be an agile organization where people can quickly make decisions, shifting our mindset to more rapid speed, right? And ability to do that. So in being agile, engaging employees, creating leaders at all levels, getting, like Susan said earlier, bringing information closer to the customer. So who are those people that are close to the customer and getting information to them quickly? And then creating a culture of where people like to learn. Learning is what we're all trying to do every day as we do these stand-ups. So being agile can bring a company up to 200% benefit or 3 times total return to shareholders. So this is why in the work that I'm doing with Susan, we work with her leaders, we work with the other senior HR business partner leaders to work with the leadership team at the top to really start to think about the words they use, the actions that they take in creating leaders within the organization. So let's talk a little bit more about what we're talking about with that. So if you could switch to the next slide, thanks. So here's some of the shifts that we're trying to make within the organization. You'll probably recognize some of these, especially if you've been in business or working world. So we're trying to shift from thinking like an individual contributor. A lot of our performance management systems have always been created around the individual. An individual sets a goal at the beginning of the year, and then through the year, they try to achieve that goal. Very focused on the individual. Where we're trying to get them to is to think more of a team, more of a collective impact. Susan talked about OKRs, and that creating those OKRs for a team is what helps us all work as a team and think as a team and try to achieve those. Second one is inward oriented versus customer focused. So a lot of times we think we know what the customer wants. This is a process of thinking through creating personas of customers and thinking really deeply about what they need and what they want. From decisions made at the top, which I talked about earlier, to responsibility is put where the information is. A lot of decisions made at the top, very top-down structure, hierarchy. As Jill had said earlier, we're like 160 plus years old. I've only been here 35, but I can tell you, even in those 35 years, it's very much a hierarchical structure that we have created through the years, and we'll talk a little bit more around that. From fear of failure to encourage continuous improvement and fail fast. So what happens is employees get paralyzed almost, right? They want to do things right. Fear of failure. They've created some filters that they put things through. We've all created filters through years in the company about failing. And we're trying to shift that thinking to it's okay to fail fast, move on, learn from it, move on, continuous learning. And then from avoid personal risk, similar to embracing that learning, and analyze and perfect. This is a really hard one, even for me, every day, is I try to make things as perfect as I can get them before I deliver that product. And that comes from years and years of being taught how to operate in that way. And we're trying to shift that now to act and iterate. I say to people every day, act your new way to thinking. So let's go to the next slide, Susan, and we can talk about that a little further. So these are the core principles of adaptive leadership, which we're talking about, we're training our employees on, we talk through them every day. Our coaches, we have a team of now about 25 coaches in the organization that work within these team meetings and not only teach this stuff, but also give feedback to people on it. So I'm going to start at the top here and go around. So don't be good, get better. So that's just a concept we use every day is we'll never be satisfied, right? No matter where we get, let's think, what can we do more? It's really exciting, and it's exciting for teams. Leaders make it safe, not stressful. So Susan alluded to that. Leaders have to make the organization in which they work safe for people in order so that you'll hear their voice. Because again, we've all created filters, and oftentimes people won't speak up because in past experiences, they've been shot down or the leader always makes the decision. So we're trying to help to teach, especially our top management team, how to make that safer through things that they can do, tools that they can use. Push authority to information, non-information authority. That's an interesting one, right? So everybody's used to putting together PowerPoint decks, and everybody meets before meetings, and then one person or a couple people go to a meeting and present what they've come up with or what the work they've been working on. This is turning that upside down. Now what happens is these teams are working and the leadership actually comes to the teams. So looking at the team work, we're trying to limit the amount of PowerPoint decks we do. We actually use an online system, and people give real life data as the team is working, and that's what our leadership team watches and interacts with. Tune control based on level of competency and clarity, and Susan talked about that a little bit earlier. You have to have three pieces: control, competence, and clarity together in order to really allow people to be empowered to do their work. So once we're helping leaders understand how to decide whether someone has the competence to do the work. Make sure that you explain the why and the clarity of why we need this work done, and then let's go some of that control, because if someone has the competence and they have the clarity, they won't be able to really move or do things without the control. So those three pieces we're working through a methodology. Leaders fix the environment, not the people. This is an interesting one. So typically what happens is people may be having a difficult time in an organization, and what we always do is let's fix that person, right? Let's fix that. So sometimes it's the environment in which we've created for them to work is really what we need to focus on. So we're really trying to look there. And here's my favorite, the last but not least, act your way to new thinking, not think your way to new actions. So we all know that everyone has beliefs, things that are below the surface. We're not trying to change those beliefs because we know that's really hard to do. So what we're asking people to do is just act your way to new thinking. And I say that probably 10 times a day. Try this on. If it doesn't work, you can throw it out, but give it a shot and let's see where we can go with it. Thanks, Susan. Next. So I thought I'd bring you back a few years. This is a radio factory in the 1930s. And I know I can't interact with you guys, I can't hear you, but I would typically ask you here, who's doing the thinking in this picture? And who's doing the doing? And you'll probably tell me the person over to the left, you see that one man that's standing up over to the left, is the one thinker in that entire group. So this is a radio factory. They're probably putting a radio together. And when someone has a question, where do they go? They probably get up and go and ask the thinker over there. And that person makes the decision on what they should do. So this is where we've evolved from. So I thought I'd show you this to kind of ground you in where did we come from in management. People would be, the person who was really good at making the radio was likely to end up in the thinking position over there, right? So through history, this is kind of how we've evolved. So let's take a look at, on the next slide, Susan, where we are today and what this might look like today. So all we have here is this woman over here on the left. She is the leader. We got a conference room table, everybody's around it. And she says, our sales are down and we are forecasting, I'm sorry, I can barely read it, Susan. We're forecasting a sleeper decline as the year progresses. I've given a lot of thought and I think we should. And she goes on to say what she thinks we should do and then ends it with, do you agree? Now, so many of you have probably been in those situations before. And what do you think is happening in all the heads of all these people sitting around here? I'm sure the same thing that happened in your heads. So one person's thinking this will never work. Another person is, this is no way. There's no way I'm answering this question. How do I answer that? She just wants us to agree. Listen, she asked us, do you agree? This guy says, it sounds right to me. He's not disagreeing at all, right? And this one over here is saying, oh my, I hope she doesn't ask me to do the project. And then the last one says, I think the decision has already been made. So this is a leader who walks into a room, says what they believe. How many people in that room do you think are really going to disagree with that leader? And so this is the kind of thing we're asking our senior leaders, especially, to start thinking about the words that they use and start to just let the groups do their work and really don't have a lot of voice until the end, or ask really good questions to help the group do their work, to create more leaders within the organization. So on the next slide, I think you have to pop them all back up again, Susan. Yeah, them all back up. Okay, so on the next slide, she changes her words a little bit. So let's think about that. So our sales are down and we're forecasting a sleeper year. And she ends it with, this time, how will we solve for this? So now what happens is people say things like, we will circulate the customer segment data again. We'll take a look at that. I'll meet with the sales team for their perspective. Our sales may be impacted by trends. Jen, can you tell us more? Give us more details about how this came to your attention. Sounds like the end of the week We can rework the data, get insights from sales and service, and update sales projects. We'll have to question the forecast. I'm seeing what I think are early signs of bounce back. So what's different here between these two things? Clearly, this is a leader who came in and instead of saying, here's my idea, what do you think about that? Or does that make sense? Or some of those other words that we use that kind of shuts down the group. In this example, she's actually asking them to come up with those ideas. And what are some of the things she can do while these people are coming up with it? She could be asking good questions. How will that help? What are the things we should think more about? What are the things that can get in the way? So this is one of the tools that we're talking with our leaders about when they are interacting with their groups to really think more about that. So I've been working with a sales leader since spring. And remember, I'm a coach. So my job is to help the leaders of the organization think about this stuff. And when we're actually in a group together, listen for things, think about the words you're using, and try to keep silent till the end, other than good questions. And so when I started working with that leader in the spring, really the first thing that he almost couldn't grasp this, right? So he was focused on the agile, the stand-up work, the retrospectives, but he had kind of all the answers for the group because he'd been in this for 30 years. Right. So he kind of knew where he wanted to go and he would say it and he would lead conversations. Fast forward to August, he started to think differently. Well, let me try this stuff on. Let me see what this looks like a little different. And he did. And one meeting, he sat very silent and he listened to the group doing the work. And one of his thoughts in this was so interesting to me because he said, I had the answer. I wanted to help the group with their answers. I had the answer to what they were talking about, but I knew I shouldn't do it. I should just sit. And sure enough, what happened is the group not only came up with the idea that he had already thought of, but also found he listened to new ideas. So he's hooked. And he says it to us all the time. He is hooked on it. And now he's figured out how to ask more questions versus giving solutions. That's no longer his job, is to give the solutions to the group. His job is to help them think, is to create more thinkers within the organization. And next. Oh, and then she comes back to say at the end, and then this is just the last slide, which I think I skipped up to, which is what is the difference between these two groups. So hopefully that'll give you an idea. We just gave you one tool there around adaptive leadership. There are other things that we talk about with people around safety, around helping people feel like their views are needed and wanted. We actually give an example during the our training, and when we talk to people about is one of the shuttles that came back in 2004. Which one is it, Susan? Is it Columbia? Was Columbia 2004 that exploded? Challenger. I always mix up Columbia and Challenger. So the Challenger came back into the atmosphere over Texas in 2000.
Oh, no, you're right. That was Columbia.
Okay. And it exploded. And come to find out, after NASA did some review, they found that there was actually at least one man in the organization that knew there was something wrong with the shuttle before it took off, which is amazing. And that man had told a couple people that he thought there was something going on, but no one paid attention to him. That same man was in a big conference room where they just before the shuttle was to take off with a whole bunch of high leaders, and he never said a word because he said, well, the leaders of this organization should recognize that and know that they're the leaders, they're the decision makers and the bosses. But what happened is it took off. Who wanted to be the person who said the thing that avoided the shuttle from taking off? So it took off. We had an explosion. And in the aftermath, we talked to people about what words were used by the leaders of the organization. Things like, we have an open environment. We allow lots of interaction with our people. There's no reason for this to have happened. They talk about, there was posters on the wall that says, if you see something, say something. So what it brought back is to, especially to our organization, we talked to them about that example, is that there could be things when there's big products to be launched or there's big things. If we don't create an environment in which people are safe to say things, we may end up with a disaster, right? So it's really important that we create an environment of safety, which Susan alluded to before, around psychological safety, so that people can not only participate and talk about when things are wrong, talk about their ideas, and disagree with their leadership. We have leaders in the organization who have given me examples of how they believe that their ideas are, they hire people, they want people in those seats to disagree with them. They actually will say in meetings, here is an idea that I came up with. If you agree with me, you can keep silent. I want to hear from everyone who disagrees with me or sees different ways of looking at this. Because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for all kinds of diversity of ideas in the organization and trying to create a culture to speed up our metabolism. And with that, I think I'm handing that over to Mark.
Thanks, Michelle. So the adaptive leadership is really interesting. I have a team of 15 people, and obviously I send out lots of email, and my old habit was to end my emails with, does that make sense? And through adaptive leadership, I came to realize, what I'm actually doing is asking people to tell me that I'm crazy, right? So if I created an environment of psychological safety, they might very well do that and tell me that I'm crazy. But if I haven't, basically what I've done is set up a situation where they're not going to tell me what they think. Does that make sense? No, Mark, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So that's not going to happen. So adaptive leadership has really started me thinking about language and how do I ask questions or say things or not say things that allow people who are closest to the work and have the knowledge to express their opinions, because we end up making better decisions in the end. So just little things to think about that can make a really big difference. So I want to switch gears a little bit because I want to talk to you about the environment that Tim and I work in every day. And I think the environment that either you're in now as you're out looking for a job, or you're thinking about, as if you're a first year grad student, you might be in that market in a year or so, and what's that going to look like? So I want to talk a little bit about the environment that we're living with. And one of my favorite quotes is from Alvin Toffler, who said, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read or write. It will be those who can't learn, and learn again. So we are clearly in a space where it is not necessarily going to be what you do in the moment. It's going to be the skills you bring to the table and how those skills are portable. So if we go to the next slide, there are some areas that I want to touch on that I think have major impact on the workforce as well as on the workplace. At Equitable, we're spending a lot of time talking about both of those things and the intersection of them. So what is our workforce going to look like? What skills they need to drive our business? And quite honestly, given and I heard this phrase yesterday in a meeting, which I really like, the now normal, what is it that we are going to be doing with our workplaces? So just spend a few minutes talking about each one of these things, because I believe that they certainly are impacting the workforce that we're all in today. So we talk about digital enablement. A year ago, if we were having this session, Susan mentioned this earlier, we would be sitting in front of you. We would be in a room somewhere in Charlotte, having this conversation. We're not doing that. But who knew how effective the virtual meetings and teaming could be? This was sort of thrust upon us, and necessity is the mother of invention. And we've learned collectively that this is more than just sort of let's do this when we're all not in the same place. This can be the way that we work going forward. And I think organizations are now thinking about what can we do ongoing from a digital enablement perspective to adjust the way that we work. Now, for all of you, what does that mean? I think it's a real plus. Not only is it sometimes more convenient not to be in the office, you've got more flexibility, but if you're now or soon will be thinking about looking for a new opportunity, the talent market has changed. We're no longer constrained by geography. So it used to be my job was find people in Charlotte, find people in New York City, find people in Syracuse, find people in New Jersey. Now, my mandate mostly is find the best people for the job. Doesn't matter if they're sitting in Charlotte or Kenosha or Dubuque or wherever else you can think of. We have the opportunity to expand the talent pool. So if you're looking for an opportunity, when you're looking for an opportunity at some point in your career, which you certainly will be, the coronavirus has changed the way that a lot of organizations think about talent and where that talent sits. So I would not for 1 second think that trying to equate anything positive with the coronavirus, but it's getting people to rethink the way that they look at sort of the way they do work and the where of the work. So it's opening up opportunities that wouldn't have been available before. I think when we think about contactless interaction, Susan referred earlier to our educators, the group of folks who used to go into schools, talk to teachers, talk to administrators, talk to principals about tax-exempt investing, 403Bs, and things of that nature. It was a very relationship-based, high-touch. We're in the schools all the time. The students aren't even in the schools all the time anymore, right? So it's not possible for our folks to be there. Our sales force would sit at kitchen tables with their clients and talk about their families and talk about their futures and protecting those families. Not sitting at those kitchen tables anymore. So contactless interaction, which is much harder to say than I thought when I put it on the page, is probably for the foreseeable future going to be the way that sales works on a lot of different dimensions. So if you're thinking about a role that really was sort of face-to-face, in-person, that's changed. And so it's a different medium. And are you comfortable in those new mediums? Because that's going to be necessary to be successful in a role that used to be very much relationship-based in person. The next one is fascinating to me, the increase of the gig worker. Quite honestly, I have no idea where that's going. So if you think about all of the talk a few years ago, gig work was on the rise. People were starting new businesses, becoming entrepreneurs, becoming contractors. That was very much connected to the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act obviously broke the connection between benefits and employment. So no longer, obviously, and you all know this, no longer were you tied to an employer for health insurance. So it gave you the opportunity to do work that you loved. And the data was very interesting because what we saw, people who were doing gig work, who were independent contractors, had a higher satisfaction rate for the work that they were doing than people who actually worked for organizations. So it was a very interesting development in the workforce. The Affordable Care Act, who knows, right? At this point, it is in flux. It could be continued. It could go away. We don't know. So the future of the gig economy is a little bit up in the air, which certainly impacts choices and opportunities going forward. The other piece that's interesting, and if you let me sort of go into HR nerd speak for a minute, I don't know if anybody has been following what's been going on in California, but there was a House bill that passed in California that basically made people who were working for Uber, Lyft, the bill made them employees. They were no longer independent contractors. They became employees, which meant they were entitled to benefits, health insurance, unemployment insurance, things of that nature. California just had Proposition 22, which was on the ballot, that was pushed by Lyft, Uber, to negate House Bill AB 5 in California, to say that these people were truly independent contractors, so those companies wouldn't have to provide benefits for them. That was recently, it was just on the ballot, and Proposition 22 passed overwhelmingly in California, making those employees contractors once again. So that whole space is a little bit in flux. And I think the future of the gig economy has a lot of things that are resting on some of those decisions that have come down recently. In terms of working from home, has become sleeping at the office. There's going to be, I think, lots of retrospective looks at what working from home does in terms of people's satisfaction at work. Yes, it's convenient, but what we're seeing now is there's a true sense of loss where people are missing that connection at work. They're missing those water cooler conversations. They're missing the opportunities to collaborate. And there used to be fences around the workday. You showed up in the office, you did your work while you were in the office, the day ended, you left, you went home. Now, those boundaries are becoming less rigid, and the workday is extending, and people are having, I think, some interesting experiences with regard to working from home. So it's going to be telling as things go along as to how the whole work from home impacts corporate culture. I think we talked a little bit, Susan and Michelle talked a little bit about agility leading to profitability. Michelle talked about how companies who are agile and adopting new ways of working are showing greater rates of return. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that. Again, I think we touched on organizational culture. One of the questions that people always ask me in interviews is, tell me about Equitable's corporate culture. And we have a great story to tell about Equitable's corporate culture. But when I'm sitting in my basement, how impactful is Equitable's corporate culture on what I do every single day? So interesting to see long-term, I think, when you're out looking for a role and you're thinking about where do I want to work and what's the corporate culture of that organization, how does corporate culture become manifest when you're not in it every day or any day because you're not going to the office? And so the last one that I want to talk about, just in the interest of time, is automation. So everybody talks about, we're becoming more automated jobs that traditionally were done. I look at recruiting as an example, that were traditionally done by people are now being done either by machine or through machine learning, artificial intelligence. The example everyone thinks about, that I think about, is the adoption and the implementation of the automatic teller machine. Right, so everybody thought, okay, we've now got the ATM machine. We no longer need tellers. I don't have to go into the branch. I can deposit my check. I can do whatever it is I want to do, and we don't need tellers. So the teller job is going to quickly fade away. Well, if you looked at this, the actual result of the ATM machine was that it increased the number of teller jobs, because what banks learned was it was less expensive to open a new branch because they needed less tellers. They wanted to open more branches across the communities that they were in. And so at the end of the day, because they were able to open more branches because it was less expensive, because they needed less tellers to staff them, teller jobs actually increased. So I think sometimes we don't actually realize the full impacts of automation until we're living with it for a little while. So Susan, if we want to look at the next slide. So just some numbers, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking on about this, but the data shows us that automation doesn't, for the most part, make jobs go away. Most jobs in the US cannot be automated. So I think as we look at the world of work and as we look at opportunities, automation, I think, changes what we do. So in my world, we're adopting artificial intelligence as the first contact that candidates will have with Equitable. If you think about jobs that you've applied to in the past, I suspect all of you have had the experience of not necessarily hearing back from a company that you applied to. You applied for the job, and your application went into the proverbial black hole of our applicant tracking systems, and you basically got a thank you note when you applied and a thank you note for applying when you didn't get the job. Artificial intelligence is changing that, where we're able to contact every candidate who applies for a job with Equitable. And so the recruiter then isn't necessarily having to contact all of the people who apply. In 2019, Equitable had 45,000 people apply for jobs. We have 6 recruiters. We can't talk to all those people, but artificial intelligence is making us more effective at what we do. So automation is going to be key. It's going to change the jobs we do, but it's not going to make them, at least most of them, go away. So if we look at the next slide.
Is that the one?
There we go. So what Equitable's doing to address a lot of these external forces that are affecting our environment, we all are aware of what's going on with racial inequality in our country. Equitable has really kind of put a stake in the ground and has said we are going to be a force for good in our communities. So some of the things that we're doing are we're addressing racial equity in our workforce, which we'll talk a little bit about, being a force for good in the community. And then Michelle and Susan have talked about thinking differently about how we work. So if we go to the next slide, just a little bit about what we're doing as an organization to address racial inequity and systemic racism that we all know exists. So one of the things that we've done that's been very impactful is our CEO, who has also signed on to the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, has created a task force that really is focused on making Equitable the employer of choice for Black professionals in the financial services industry. And we're focusing specifically on Black professionals now because we realize that anything that we do for Black professionals in the marketplace in our community, we can then expand out to other diverse communities. But those kinds of efforts have to start at the top, and our CEO has made it very clear that this is something that Equitable is going to be focused on. And so we're looking both internally and externally. We're trying to do a lot of work to educate our employees on the inequities that exist and get them thinking about unconscious bias and things that will allow us to create that environment that Michelle talked about psychological safety. We're also very proud of the awards and the recognition that we've gotten as an organization about being an employer of choice in diverse communities. So we've been certified, I think, for 4 or 5 years in a row as being a great place to work. We're certified as the best place to work for people in the LGBTQ community. And again, our CEO has made it very clear that addressing systemic racism and racial inequity is critical to us. And as an organization, I don't think that we're different in this regard, but we have a very strong employer resource group community. They're very active, and you can see here who they are, the groups that we've got, and they've been playing a very important role, especially lately, around driving conversations around systemic racism and how do we deal with that as an organization. So if we look at the next slide, our CEO, and this is a phrase that he uses constantly, he wants Equitable to be a force for good in our community. And you can see, I'm not going to go through this, but line for line, but you can see, if you look at this, that Equitable is making a commitment to serving the communities that we're in. So Equitable has a foundation where we do scholarships for a variety of students who are don't have the means to perhaps go to college. We support Dress for Success. It's one of our foundation's focal points. Teachers obviously are critical to our business, and we do a lot of work to support that community. I think when COVID outbreak first started, we shipped tons of hand sanitizer to schools, as an example, just something that we could do for the teachers who do so much in their communities for our kids. So you can see that Equitable is committed to the communities that we're in. And then if we look at the next slide, I just wanted to close with the impact of all of this on what it means to be in the market and looking for a new role. It used to be that when you look for a position, it was, I have a job and I need somebody to come in and do that job. That truly no longer exists. When I interview candidates, I'm no longer interviewing them for a job. I'm interviewing them for the organization. I'm interviewing them for their ability to contribute on multiple levels. So it's no longer about, I know this thing. I want them to have portable skills and competencies that, in many instances, regardless of the job that they're in, they're going to be able to take these skills and have impact. So the right side of this slide, we talk about being able to lead change, being adaptable, being innovative, having emotional intelligence, having a commitment to diversity and inclusion. Those are the things that if you're out in the marketplace anytime in the near future, I guarantee you that any employer is going to want to see when they talk to you as you're showing up on the monitor. I was going to say sitting across the desk from them. That's not happening anytime in the near future. But as they're looking at you on the monitor, these are the things that they're going to be looking for. Whether they ask you about them or not, if you convey them during the course of the interview, can assure you that's going to put you in a different place than a lot of other people who aren't focused on these things. So I think that was my last slide, I believe. Yes, because I didn't have anything else to say, so I'm glad that was the last slide.
Wow.
All right.
That was so much content and so much for us to ponder. What an incredible company and an incredible change you're bringing about. I said at the start, I love that you've been around since 1859, but so innovative and so modern. It's truly impressive. And thank you, Michelle, for making my inner history happy with that 1930s picture of the radio factory. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A now. So the way that we will do this is you can all see on the left side of your screen there, it says reception, stage, and then sessions. So Q&A will take place in the sessions room. You hit the leave that's in the upper right-hand corner. You click on sessions, and then you'll see where you can click on the Q&A. So let's quickly go there and make the most of our presenters' time. Thank you